Alex, people look at these machines and think they're entering the Star Trek age where you just boop a button and a hot pastrami sandwich appears. But in reality, owning a 3D printer is more like adopting a very moody, high maintenance parrot that speaks exclusively in G code and spite.
A parrot that spits molten plastic at you when it's mad? That sounds about right. I'm looking at this little boat you printed, Tiger. It looks like it went through a blender and then tried to grow a beard. What happened here?
That, my friend, is the spaghetti incident of Tuesday. I walked away for 20 minutes to grab a coffee, and when I came back, the printer was just happily weaving a polyester sweater in midair. It had completely lost its grip on reality and the build plate.
And that's what we're diving into today on the Tiger Den, the dark art of 3D printing troubleshooting. Because when things go right, it's magic. But when they go wrong, it's a plastic exorcism. Tiger, pull up a chair. Let's start at the very beginning. Literally, the nothing is happening phase.
Yeah, the ghost print. The head is moving, the fans are whirring, but it's just drawing invisible lines. Usually that's your extruder having a midlife crisis. Either the filament is stripped, meaning the gear has ground a little U-shaped notch into the plastic so it can't grip it anymore, or you've got a clog that's tighter than a rusted bolt on a 1965 Chevy.
So, if I'm a beginner staring at an empty bed, what's the first move? Do I just start poking it with a needle?
Steady there, surgeon. First, check if your nozzle is actually hot. I've seen folks try to extrude cold plastic, which is like trying to push a frozen marshmallow through a straw. If it's hot and still not moving, you might need a cold pull. It's satisfying in a gross way. You let the filament cool slightly, then yank it out fast to pull all the burnt gunk out of the nozzle tip. It's like cleaning a pipe, but with more swearing.
Okay, but let's say the plastic is coming out, but it's just dragging behind the nozzle like a sad tail. It won't stick. The not sticking to the bed issue is basically the hello world of printing failures, right?
Oh, bed adhesion is the hill most makers die on. If that first layer isn't bonded to the plate like it's been welded there, the whole project is a ticking time bomb. Usually, it's one of two things. Either your bed is as oily as a deep fryer because you touched it with your fingers. Seriously, those skin oils are like Teflon for plastic. Or your nozzle is a hair too high.
I've seen you leveling that bed for 40 minutes before. You look like a safecracker trying to hear the tumblers fall.
It's a delicate dance. You want that nozzle to squish the plastic just enough so it looks like a flat ribbon, not a round bead. If it looks like a tiny tube of toothpaste resting on the glass, it's going to fly off the moment the printer accelerates. Give your bed a scrub with some high-strength isopropyl alcohol. Make it clean enough to eat off of, and then maybe, just maybe, the plastic will stay put.
What about the elephant's foot? I've had prints where the bottom looks like it's melting outward into a little pedestal. It ruins the dimensions if I'm trying to fit parts together.
That's the classic oversquish. You're so worried about it not sticking that you've smashed the nozzle down too hard, or your bed temperature is high enough to keep the plastic in a semi-liquid state. It's like sitting on a marshmallow. It's got to go somewhere, so it squirts out the sides. Turn the bed temp down 5 degrees after the first layer, or back off your Z offset just a smidge.
Speaking of things squirting out the sides, let's talk about the hairy print. You know when it looks like a spider inhabited the printer overnight? Stringing is the bane of my existence.
Ah, the cobwebs. That's purely a matter of retraction and oozing. Think of the nozzle like a hot glue gun. When you stop squeezing the trigger, the glue still wants to drool out. In a 3D printer, we tell the motor to suck the filament back a few millimeters when it moves between spots. If your retraction isn't dialed in, or if your filament has soaked up moisture from the air like a sponge, it's going to leave those wispy trails everywhere.
Wait, wet filament? I thought it was plastic. How does plastic get wet?
It's hygroscopic, big word for thirsty. Nylon, PETG, and even regular PLA will suck humidity right out of the room. When that moisture hits the 200-degree nozzle, it turns to steam, creates pressure, and pushes the plastic out when it should be staying put. It's like trying to fry bacon with a wet spatula. Lots of popping and mess. If you hear little snapping sounds while you print, your filament needs a session in a dryer.
That's a tip most people ignore until they've wasted 3 spools. Okay, let's move to the mid-print disasters. Layer shifting. 1 minute you're printing a cube, the next minute the printer decides the top half of the cube should be 3 inches to the left. It's heartbreaking.
Layer shifting is usually a mechanical oopsie. Imagine you're running a marathon and someone trips you. You're still running, but you're in the wrong lane now. If a belt is loose, it might skip a tooth on the gear. Or even more common, the nozzle might clip a curled edge of the print. The motor tries to move, the nozzle hits the plastic, the motor skips, and now the printer's internal map is totally out of sync with where the head actually is.
So it's basically a GPS error for robots.
Exactly, check your belts. They should twang like a guitar string, not flop like a wet noodle. And keep an eye on your cooling. If the corners of your print are curling up, we call that warping. The nozzle is eventually going to headbutt that corner. It's a heavyweight fight, and the printer usually loses.
We've talked about too much squish and not enough stick. But what about pillowing? I hate it when the top of my print has these little gaps or looks like it's got bubbles under a rug.
Pillowing is a classic heat and air problem. You're trying to lay down a solid top floor over a hollow basement, the infill. If your cooling fan isn't blowing hard enough, the hot plastic just sags into the gaps of the infill. Or it's so thin that the hot air inside the part is trying to escape and pushes up little domes. The fix is boring but effective. Add more top layers. If you're only doing 2 layers, it's like trying to cover a pothole with a sheet of paper. Give it 6 layers and it'll smooth out like a freshly paved road.
Okay, let's get into the under-extrusion versus over-extrusion debate. I feel like this is where people start changing 100 settings in their slicer and end up making it 10 times worse.
It's the too many cooks syndrome. Look, under extrusion, where you see gaps between your lines or the walls look like lace, is almost always a hardware bottleneck. A partial clog, a slipping extruder gear, or you've just told the software your filament is 1.75 millimeters when it's actually 1.68 millimeters.
And over-extrusion? That's the messy, blobbish look?
Yeah, that's just greedy printing. The printer is dumping more plastic than there is room for. It makes the dimensions wander off and gives you these ugly zits on the surface. Honestly, 9 times out of 10, just calibrating your E-steps, which is basically teaching the printer exactly how much filament an inch is, solves both. It's the shop equivalent of checking your tire pressure before you go swapping out the whole engine.
You've definitely swapped the engine before checking the tires, haven't you?
Oh, I've spent 3 days rebuilding a Hod only to realize the filament spool was tucked under a bracket and couldn't even spin. I felt like a real genius that day, let me tell you. I was ready to throw the whole machine into the pond.
What's the one problem that still gives you the shivers? The one where you just know it's going to be a long night?
Heat creep. It's the silent killer. The heat from the nozzle travels up the metal tube where the filament is supposed to stay cold. The plastic softens way too early, builds up a plug, and jams the whole works 3 hours into an 8-hour print. You can't see it, you can't easily measure it, you just find a failed print and a clicking motor. It usually happens because the tiny little fan on the front of the print head is dusty or dying. It's a reminder that even in this high-tech world, a 5-cent piece of dust can bring a $1,000 machine to its knees.
So, for the folks listening who are currently staring at a pile of plastic bird nests and feeling like they should have just taken up knitting, what's the takeaway here?
The takeaway is that every failure is just the machine teaching you how it works. When I started, I thought a failed print was a waste of money. Now, I see it as a diagnostic report. If it shifts, my belts are loose. If it strings, my plastic is wet. The machine is screaming its problems at you. You just have to learn the language.
It's a relationship. You have to listen to your moody, plastic-spitting parrot.
Exactly. And maybe don't leave the room for 20 minutes when you're starting a new roll of filament. Because the moment you turn your back, that parrot is going to try to knit you a sweater you didn't ask for.
Well, I'm going to go check my belts and maybe buy a dry box. Thanks for the therapy session, Tiger.
Anytime. And remember, if the first layer isn't perfect, the rest is just a very expensive way to make trash. Slow down, level that bed, and keep your nozzle clean. We'll see you next time in the den.